Hey guys, it's ExandShadow, and welcome to the grand finale of Let's Play LostWinds. In the last part, we got started on the final half of the Restore Dio's Memory. I was going to say side quest, but it's really kind of our quest at the moment, right? Do we even have a quest? What are we even trying to do? We're just a guy in a stupid hat with a cape that's awesome and a wind spirit thingy who's it? Anyway, I used clever editing in order to make it so that it looked like I went through that door, but really it doesn't. The way that I went through doesn't really lead anywhere. So, but I did some pointless backtracking, so I just edited it so that I came out the normal entrance that I normally went through. Anyway, I was being dumb there. No, you cannot pass your way through flimsy vine barricades. You have to burn them down. I'm pretty sure I could crawl through those too, but whatever. Anyway, this is the last chest that we need to get. It's to the west, and in order to get to it, it's pretty simple. We just have to break down this flimsy wooden barricade, go through a few puzzle rooms, and then we're pretty much set. It doesn't matter what you use to break down the flimsy wooden barricades. Rocks works. If you wanted to, you could even use the fruit that was a few steps to the left of the rock. I mean, you'd have to break down the vine barricade, but, you know, it's really not that big of a deal. Anyway, this is pretty much the last area that we're going to be exploring throughout the entire game. It's not too different from what we've previously seen, but it's also the only area that's completely new, because the area that we saw for the third chest, could potentially be the fourth, but it's the third chest that I got in this playthrough. The area that we saw there was an area that we had kinda already been through, and using Vortex on fire looks fucking cool, man. Sorry, I got distracted a bit. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, what was I saying? A nice little visual trick that they did there to let you know how much gust you have left. When you're in midair, you only have a certain amount of gusts or slipstreams before you just can't do anymore. You can tell how many you have left by looking at the cursor. Enroll will become more and more transparent the more wind powers you do in the air. So the more transparency gets, the less boost you will get in the middle of the air, to the point. Well, I don't think you get less boost, but you get more and more transparent. And when you're almost completely transparent, you have no more jumps, and you've got to actually land on the ground. There's no real logical reason for why we have to be on the ground in order to use our wind powers, but, you know, gameplay, so I'm not going to really question it. Anyway, this is, I think, if I remember correctly, this is the last real puzzle room in the entire game. Backtracking isn't usually a big deal, and, yeah, the final boss isn't really a puzzle room, it's a final boss. Oh, fuck, I spoiled the fact that there was a final boss in a video game, oh no. Yeah, there's a final boss. Anyway, the game really does, speed right by. Even the first time you play it, the game does a magnificent job at pacing itself. It does what it wants to do, it doesn't meander, and as soon as the concepts start to wear thin, it just says, okay, we've had enough, you're done. That's, I think, a really admirable trait for a game, is to know when to stop. Actually, that's a really admirable trait for anything. I'm looking at you, American comics. Anyway, yeah, just things need to know when to end. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and LostWinds, thankfully, does not overstay its welcome. Thankfully, well, I won't say thankfully. I should say honestly. I think it could have stayed a little bit longer. I mean, it kind of left in a hurry. Used my family emergency accident when really we wouldn't have mind having him over. But if he had stayed too much longer, I think he would have gotten drunk and passed out on the floor. And this metaphor is really weird. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I appreciate the game ending where it does, just so that the mechanics and the gameplay doesn't feel padded or too drawn out. I appreciate a short game that's concise and well made, as opposed to a long game that just sort of meanders. That's sort of why I have a problem with 80-hour RPGs and stuff like that. I mean, gameplay is great. I love having more hours in a game so that I can just spend more time immersed in the world. But when I get to hour 40 and I don't feel like I've accomplished anything, that's when I know that you're padding. Sorry, that's just how things are. Anyway, the trick to this puzzle basically is to remember that you do not have to have Toku next to things in order to get things to work. Like, for example, as long as we were able to see that Echo Ball, which is a slightly darker hue. It's slightly darker in color for no good reason, but we were able to see it, but we were not physically right next to it. You do have to remember that as long as something is in view of the camera, you do have the ability to manipulate it using your wind powers. That's something that always trips me up in games like this, because I always feel like I have to be right next to something before I use my abilities, when sort of thinking outside of the box and doing your abilities around walls and stuff is actually a really creative way of using these puzzles. Doing these puzzles, I should say. Fun fact about the Echo Balls. I'm sure they have a real name, but I don't give a shit. Anyway, fun fact about those. If you let them just sort of do their sound for a long enough period of time, it will actually kill enemies. So if you have a whole lot of enemies in the room, I think that's an adequate way to deal with them. It takes a few seconds, though, and you will have to deal with them swarming you as the Echo Ball works its vaguely defined magic. But still, it's better than nothing, you know? It's definitely a whole lot better than trying to gust them into things, and it's a whole lot quicker than trying to vortex every single one of the enemies that's on the screen, you know? The range is a little bit small, but I think they do that just to keep the game from becoming broken, as well as I think there are some points in this game where enemies have to be used as a part of a puzzle solution. I might be thinking of the sequel, though. The sequel does that a whole lot more. Anyway, plot's happening on screen right now. Basically, Dio remembered that there was this creature named Magmok, and he's been covered by evil purple globs of goo. And he's apparently kind of a nice guy, but being corrupted by evil purple globs of goo generally makes you into kind of a dick, so we need to take care of him. This is pretty much the only boss fight in the entire game. It's the final boss, and I'm not gonna lie, this personally is the most disappointing part of LostWinds, because we've got this giant rock creature that sort of comes out of nowhere. We fight him for a bit, and then the game's pretty much over. The boss fight really isn't all that interesting either. It's kind of your very basic 3 knocks and you're done sort of deal. Basically, you have to what you're supposed to do is he'll do his attack, and you have to counterattack by burning off the goop on his hand and then ripping it off. And then you do that with the other hand, and then you vortex his I'm pretty sure that you vortex his head with the boulder that's there, and then you're pretty much done. It's a pretty easy boss fight that's really not that big of a deal. I guess I don't know what to think about it, because these mechanics don't really lend themselves to combat very well, as you can pretty plainly see. They're more meant for exploration and puzzle solving than actual combat. So I don't think that a boss with this game's control scheme would work too great, but this is just more of a sort of a disappointing aspect to the boss, and I guess part of it isn't necessarily the boss itself, but sort of the scale of it. Because, I mean, like, the boss really, like, in the background, we've just got the standard drums that we've had for every other enemy encounter up to this point. There's no, like, special boss music or anything. And while I like Magmok's design, it's not incredibly threatening or anything. I mean, you can tell that he's sort of fighting off the purple globs of goo invading his brain as he's fighting you, because you can tell because he's sort of holding his head and stuff like that. Which I guess is nice from a character perspective, but you can tell that he's really not that much of a threat because of it. The second game does have a better boss fight, I feel, and the second game does sort of prove that, yes, these mechanics do have, boss fights and these mechanics can potentially work together. This boss fight just doesn't really do a good job of supporting that. Anyway, it's not a terrible boss, it's just kind of a bland and kind of it's kind of a letdown of an ending, I guess. Not that it's bad, it's just, it could have been better, is just all that I'm thinking. But after beating the boss, Magmok becomes his normal, moss-covered self, and then the game ends. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We get very little actual resolution. What was our goal again? Because I'm pretty sure we haven't heard anything about giant rock golems up to this point. You know, just saying. But yeah, kind of crappy ending aside. Well, I don't want to say it's crappy. It's a kind of unfulfilling ending aside. LostWinds overall still is a very, 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 a lot more varies fun game. It's only $10, so it's a good bang for your buck. You get about, I'd say about 2 to 3 hours of enjoyment your first time through for $10, which means you're getting a better value than going to the movies or something. And it's also just one of those really unique experiences that I wouldn't, that you don't really get a chance to see anywhere else. There's also a sequel to this game, and if you had to choose between one or the other, I would definitely say get the sequel. But if you're interested enough in the series as a whole to get both of them, this is still a very fun game, and I really do recommend that everyone check it out. It's sort of sad because you can tell by the ending of this game that they had sort of kind of planned for an episodic release for this series. Basically, if the sequel is anything to take into consideration, they were going to have a bunch of games, and each one would be focused on one of the spirits. Like this one's focused on Dio, and the next game is also focused on the spirit. But the next game also is the last game that's come out, and that came out in 2009, I believe. So there's really no reason to believe that there's going to be another LostWinds game coming out anytime soon, which is a shame because this is a property that had some promise, and I really did enjoy it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the LP, as short as it was, and I hope you'll tune in next time when I take on the sequel. I'm ExandShadow, and I'll see you guys later.